Cape Cod Broadcasting weaves the listening environments of 99.9 WQRC, Ocean 104.7, WFCC Classical 107.5, Cape Country 104, and CapeCon.com's website experience to reflect the lifestyles of the people who live, work, and play on Cape Cod. We hope that you enjoy this podcast.
I'm Laura Reckford, and this is Sunday Journal. I'm here in the studio with Lucy Loomis, director of the Sturgis Library in Barnstable Village, and Antonia Stevens, the library's assistant director. Welcome to the show to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, we're going to be talking about a new resource at Sturgis Library, but let's start with an overview of the library itself, because this is really a very special library, not only in the region, but in the country. Lucy?
It is. We're considered the oldest building housing a library in the country. The building was built in 1644 as a meeting house for the Reverend John Lothrop, who was one of the founders of the town of Barnstable. And then it was a private home, and then in 1867 it was opened as a public library, and it's been going ever since. And so we have public library services, but we also have very special collections. Maybe Antonia could talk about those because she works with them every day.
Well, we have an archive of Cape Cod history, and we also have great genealogical resources, including vital records from different towns in Massachusetts and published family genealogies. So we get a lot of researchers coming in, looking up their family history, and we also get a lot of descendants of the Reverend Lothrop coming in, wanting to see this special place. And look up maybe some historical things that they haven't found out already.
And that's really what we wanted to talk about in this segment, is that the library has really long specialized in genealogy, and that specialty is exceptional in the region. And how did that all get started? Did that start with an original collection that the library perhaps received early on?
I think it's a series of donations and acquisitions that were probably around the turn of the century. We had trustees who were very well known in the Boston intellectual community, and they prized having really fine collections. And then they sort of initiated people who were interested in donating their collections. One of the people named Stanley Smith collected deeds and genealogical and cemetery information, and then it sort of spiraled from there. Henry Crocker Kittredge is another one that comes to mind. He was a Cape Cod historian and maritime specialist, so we got his collections. I'm trying to think of other people.
Well, just one of the other things is that the deeds, Stanley Smith deeds, we are now in the process of getting a database online. We've been reading through the deeds and pulling out key transaction words and creating a searchable database online. And Boston Public Library digitized these deeds for us through the Digital Commonwealth. And so pretty soon people will be able to do a search for these deeds and take a look at the really high-quality images online, which is a great resource.
And this brings up the fact that libraries have really been evolving lately, and online resources are so important, and so libraries, I think, keep an eye out for what online resources might be valuable to them in particular, and that's maybe how this new resource came about. Is that right, Lucy?
Well, this new resource is sort of a hybrid at the moment. It's a resource that was from the Church of the Latter-day Saints in Utah. They have been collecting genealogy and genealogical information and copying documents from all over the world for years. And genealogists have been very excited about this because they can get access to this material through microfilm. And a lot of people think, oh, well, microfilm's a dead resource, but it's not really. In most cases, it's the only way to get access to these really rare services. So we have started an affiliation with them because there used to be a family history center in Brewster, and they had to close. I don't think they had enough volunteers to run it. So we took over that role, and Antonia could probably explain how the whole thing works, the details, how somebody might access things.
And just to clarify that the Sturgis Library has been chosen as the one in the region that is what is called a Family Search affiliate library. Is that right?
Yes. And we actually managed to get the microfilm rolls that were in Brewster. So there's been no loss of service in that sense. And people who are interested in accessing these resources can go online to the Family Search site, and they can order the films that they are interested in, and they pay a small fee there. And then those films are sent to us, and we keep them. And we have a microfilm reader, obviously, in the library, and people can come and just use those films that they've ordered for basically 90 days, and then they have to renew them, as it were.
So the idea is obviously the average person does not have a microfilm reader,
right.
So the library is assisting in that so that people can actually look at this material.
Right. And I think, the Latter-day Saints are working on digitizing these collections and putting them online, but they're not there yet. I would say probably the majority of them are not yet online. So this is really the only way for people to have access to these original records.
And just to explain, because it's this unusual thing that the Latter-day Saints have been building this archives for many, many years, and maybe you can explain that a little bit about why they have this material.
Well, I think they've gathered it so that their own members can do research into their families. It's tied into their religious beliefs that if they're connected to the Mormon Church, then their families have that same affiliation, and so it connects them. I'm not an expert in that, but the side benefit to genealogists has been huge, and so they're known as the greatest collection of genealogical resources in the world, really.
And so for Sturgis, where you've always had this focus on genealogy, this seems to fit right into what you do.
Right. And Antonia sort of spoke to David Martin of the Cape Cod Genealogical Society and got that underway.
Yeah, he was the one that suggested that it might be an ideal place for these films that Brewster had and to continue that service on Cape Cod, or at least in this region of Cape Cod.
So he helped to put that sort of relationship
Absolutely.
together. Oh,
Yes.
Interesting. And knowing where you folks stood in the realm of genealogy and how you are the library to go to for that. When he found out that this new archive from Salt Lake City was going to be available, he thought of Sturgis.
Yes. Yep. And then we submitted paperwork, and
We've got some volunteers.
Yeah. So we do have volunteers if people are interested in getting some help. There are volunteers there almost every Thursday and other days during the month. Or if they need help ordering the microfilm, Antonia or myself can help them get started. There's a page on our website that explains how to do it, and also on the Family Search website. It's really a link to them. But for new people that have never done it before, there's a lot of resources that will help them get started.
I'm Laura Reckford, and this is Sunday Journal. I'm talking with Lucy Loomis and Antonia Stevens from the Sturgis Library in Barnstable Village, which, besides being one of the oldest libraries in the country, also has one of the most extensive genealogical resources in the region, and a new resource that we're talking about now. Now, I'm sure you have people coming to the library very frequently to do this type of research. Over the years, have there been some surprising findings when people have come to the library to do this type of research?
I think what people value the most, whether it's finding somebody unusual in their family tree, is making other kinds of connections. I think genealogists, kind of get bogged down in that filling in their tree sometimes. But to me, as somebody who's the keeper of the family papers, to me, finding out more about who they were as a person is, to me, the fascinating part. Not only that I'm related to such and so a person, but this person may have been an artist or a writer or, a scientist, and not very well known to us these days, but in their own time, they might have been somebody that was really valuable to the community. So to me, that's the part that people get really interested in. That they become real to them.
And you talked a little bit about your resources there at the library, but of course what's interesting about the Cape is we go way back here to the foundings of the country. And so when people do this research, how far back are they typically able to go when they research their families?
Well, some people can go right back into basically Mayflower and a little bit before. Those resources are fairly well known. So if they're trying to find something that nobody knows about, that's usually sort of 1700s. That's kind of where stuff gets lost, because the early stuff is fairly well documented with the Mayflower Society and such. And oftentimes those clues are really, really hard to find because those documents just don't exist anymore. They've been looked for so much. So people are always trying to find little clues, or they've heard a reference somewhere, and so they're trying to find out if they can find that original document. But some of the fun things that happen for us is people who find out a little bit more about their family history, and then they go to a different part of Massachusetts and perhaps see a statue of that person or a gravestone somewhere, and they can relate that to their I had a grandmother who was able to go with her grandson and explain who this person was because she'd asked some information from us. Or even just the Lothrop descendants coming and seeing that Bible that belonged to him, and they get a real connection. It grounds them and amazes them that their history stretches back that far.
And you mentioned the graveyards, and it occurred to me that there are a number of ancient burial grounds right near the library. And do people ever stop at the library and then tell you they're going to visit the cemeteries to do some research as well?
I think that is possibly one of the most common occurrences that happens to us in the summer. And I'm trying to find a way to map out those gravestones. There's a lot of material on inscriptions and who's in the actual graveyards, but where those gravestones necessarily are isn't. I don't have any documents like that, so I'm hoping to figure out a way to get that so that when people come, they don't spend a whole bunch of time looking for something. They can just go directly to the person that they're interested in.
And I guess some graveyards are marked out where the graves are, and some are not. And I guess the ones in Barnstable Village aren't at this point.
They aren't. And I know that Steve Sundlin at the cemetery department has been doing some work, and some of those resources are available. So hopefully we can connect with him and get some work done on the ones in Barnstable Village. There are people buried there back to in the early 1600s, but unfortunately there's no stones on some of those, so it's hard to know who's there.
And for people who aren't familiar with the area, what are the significant graveyards that are nearby the library?
There's the Lothrop Hill Cemetery, which is right on 6A, just west of the library, and then there's Cobb Hill Cemetery, which is east of the library near the Unitarian Church.
And as you say, those gravestones go way back at both of those cemeteries. And, of course, there are many other graveyards around the Cape. I'm wondering, do you have a lot of people who come from off Cape to use the Sturgis Library's resources for genealogy?
Absolutely, yes. They come from all over the place, California, and they usually find out that they could spend an entire week with us, and they only have an afternoon, and they're always saying, oh, well, maybe we'll get back. But what's nice about that is I always give them my card or Lucy's card, and if they come up with questions that their small amount of research brings up, after they've already gone home, they can always get in contact with us, and we can do a little extra research for them. And so that's a nice thing to be able to do.
Now, what are the steps? Because you talked about some of the resources you have there. And so if someone walks in and they're from wherever, Midwest, California, and they say, I want to research, my family was from here, where do you send them first? What's the process for that?
Well, usually what we do is we go into the room and I explain where different resources are, the vital records or the published histories, the published genealogies. And we have this series of books called the Genealogical Notes of Cape Cod Families. It's a series of binders, green binders we call them. And those are Cape families, and within each family, they're alphabetized by first name. So I usually send people who don't have a very, very specific question. I send them there, and we look up some of the ancestors that they might be interested in. And what's nice about those books is it has a little reference as to where that information came from. And so then I will direct them to the other resources, and as they sort of narrow down their questions, they're more able to use the resources that we have in a efficient way. And then for some other people, we have the archives, our Cape Cod archives. So I send them to the finding aids, and they look up the different collections and see if there's anything there that might interest them. And then I go down and I get the boxes of material up for them and let them sort through all of that, which is quite fun.
Our collections include unique materials, maps, journals, correspondence, genealogies, deeds, photographs, just amazing materials. We have over almost 150 collections. In fact, we've outgrown our archives and are in the process of building a new archive in the basement.
And then having this new archive from Salt Lake City, what has that done to your offerings?
I mean, it expands our offerings. So our focus is really on Cape Cod, but this allows people who are starting in Cape Cod to get materials from all over the world.
And in the last couple of minutes that we have, anything coming up this summer that people should put in their calendars, different events going on at Sturgis that people should know about?
Absolutely. We have a lecture by author Paul Theroux on July 22nd. There's tickets available for that. It's $25. It's limited space, so get your tickets early. We have a lecture co-sponsored with Tales of Cape Cod by political analyst David Gergen on August 20th. And that's at Tales of Cape Cod, and then a reception at Sturgis Library. Also at Tales of Cape Cod, I'll be doing a talk along with the archaeologists that did a study of the library on the history of the building. So that's August 3rd at Tales of Cape Cod at 7 o'clock.
And, of course, there's a summer reading program, the Barnstable Library's collaborative summer reading program, so there'll be stuff going on all summer for kids.
Lots of fun things going on at Sturgis Library and great resources there. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I've been talking to Lucy Loomis and Antonia Stevens from Sturgis Library. Thank you both so much for being here with me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Laura Reckford, and this is Sunday Journal.
This podcast is a presentation of Cape Cod Broadcasting, which is solely responsible for its content. Thank you for listening. For more information, please visit us at capecodbroadcasting.com.